Now, even though many fans, myself included, consider the final encounter in Return of the Jedi to be an amazing, virtually flawless way to end the story of Anakin Skywalker, where, of course, Luke refuses to fight his father and thus brings him back from the dark side, and then his father goes on to kill Palpatine, even though it's arguably the perfect way to end the whole story and the perfect approach by Luke, what's interesting to sort of ask about it is, was that what Obi-Wan and Yoda wanted and expected Luke to do? Was that the plan all along, to see Anakin redeemed like that? Or did they have a different final outcome in mind? Did they maybe even want Luke to kill his father and the Emperor? And there is evidence, which we'll get to soon enough, to suggest that is the case. And look, don't get me wrong here. They, Yoda and Obi-Wan, seemed rather pleased with the results Luke actually did get. They seemed happy to see Anakin redeemed, and all three were looking very happily ever after together as Force ghosts there on Endor. But was Luke's success, or the way he went about it, shall we say, a welcomed surprise to Obi-Wan and Yoda? Is that not what they expected out of Luke at all? But before we can even tackle that question, perhaps we have to ask another one before it, which is, why did they leave it all up to Luke in the first place? Why did these two Jedi Masters, one of which being perhaps the most powerful Jedi ever to live, that being Yoda, why did they sit on the sidelines and let a barely trained Luke, who wasn't even an actual Jedi and wouldn't technically be one till he fought Vader, why did they even let or expect Luke to take on and defeat two insanely powerful Sith, one of which even Yoda failed to defeat, unless they expected him to do something besides just fight? And though, sure, in story we could come up with maybe a few decent explanations that would work well enough, like perhaps they thought or were shown through a Force vision or told by Qui-Gon Jinn that it was Luke's destiny to defeat the Sith, not theirs, that the last thing they needed to do before moving on to the other side and becoming a Force ghost was to see that one would be trained well enough to bring about a new Jedi Order, which of course was Luke. However, the real answer you could say is that's just what the story called for. That's just how, inadvertently you could even say, George Lucas set it all up in the first movie, that Luke had grown up oblivious to everything for 19 years, and he was now going to be the one that got trained in the ways of the Force and to stop the Sith, after Obi-Wan had gone into hiding for all that time. George Lucas also hadn't, when making that first movie, thought of things like Vader being Luke's father or Leia being his sister. Heck, even Yoda was something he had to create after the fact, you could say, after he got the chance to do a sequel and realized that he had killed off Obi-Wan and needed someone else to train Luke now. And doing a sequel to Star Wars was something that certainly wasn't guaranteed when making that first film. No one could have predicted the insane success it would have, and thus is why I certainly think we need to cut Lucas some degree of slack with the story. I'm not trying to rip apart his work here. I have a profound respect for both Lucas and, of course, Star Wars. I just like to discuss it. I like to analyze it. Basically here, Lucas had to retroactively answer some difficult questions after making the first Star Wars film and not realistically, let's say, ever expecting to get a chance to make more films. And some things he does eventually try to answer in the prequels, but a clear answer for Yoda and Obi-Wan going into exile instead of continuing the fight is never expressly given by him in the films. They just say they fail and the best thing to do is to hide the twins and go into hiding themselves, because that simply aligns with where the next trilogy begins, where the original trilogy begins, and it's up to us to really answer the why part. And so getting back to the original question now, the one asking what did Yoda and Obi-Wan really expect Luke to do? How did they see him stopping Vader and Palpatine? Did they even maybe expect him to kill the two Sith Lords somehow? Well, there are only a few lines of dialogue here and there in the films that even deal with this in any respect at all of which we'll get to, but the one we have to start with, the one that very much seems to imply the plan is for Luke to kill Vader and Sidious, comes in Return of the Jedi after Yoda has died, and the Force ghost of Obi-Wan shows up to speak with Luke.
I can't kill my own father.
Then the Emperor has already won.
This very much makes it sound like Obi-Wan is, I don't know, disappointed that Luke won't kill Vader, that Luke won't kill his own father. He kind of shrugs and says, then I guess the Sith have already won since you won't kill your dear old dad. Though Obi-Wan, of course, doesn't see Vader as Luke's father anymore, or so he claims. He doesn't see him as Anakin Skywalker. Right in this very scene, he talks about how he distinguishes the two from each other.
Your father was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader. When that happened, the good man who was your father was destroyed.
Another curious thing to also note here, or from the scene before this I should say, is that Yoda doesn't seem all too happy that Luke learned the truth about Vader either.
Yoda, I must know. Your father is.
Though Yoda, of course, tries to cover that by saying that he wasn't ready for the truth, that Luke wasn't ready for the truth, not that he was upset that Luke eventually learned the truth. But considering Yoda didn't want to talk about it even here on his deathbed and before sending Luke to confront Vader yet again, then one could ask, when exactly was it going to be a good time for Luke to learn the truth? After he killed his father, were they going to be like, oh yeah, by the way, about Vader, he was actually your father, once upon a time anyway, but it doesn't count, you see, because Vader destroyed Anakin when he turned to the dark side, so they weren't the same person anymore. I'm sure that would have gone over really, really well with Luke. The only other time then that we hear either one say anything about what exactly Luke is supposed to do is a somewhat vague line spoken by Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back when Luke is leaving to save his friends.
Stop, they must be. On this all depends. Only a fully trained Jedi Knight, with the Force as his ally, will conquer Vader and his Emperor.
And so here Yoda says that Vader and Palpatine must be conquered, which is an interesting thing to say, and I suppose could be interpreted many different ways. Anything from meaning flat out killing them to just stopping them and removing them from power without killing them, though we know that's not going to do much, is it? You'll still have two power-hungry Sith Lords out there wreaking havoc on the galaxy, and so we have to assume by conquer, Yoda means something rather permanent, something that will bring about their deaths. What's also kind of strange here is that Yoda says only a fully trained Jedi Knight can do this, and as far as we know after this, Luke, who is not a fully trained Jedi Knight at this point of course, he will never get any more training from Yoda or anyone else. In fact, the way he has to complete his training later on to become a full-on Jedi is to face Vader again.
One thing remains. Vader. You must confront Vader. Then, only then, a Jedi will you be.
Which maybe seems a little odd, doesn't it? Yoda saying only a Jedi has a chance against them, but Luke won't actually be a Jedi till he faces them. And even still, they have to know Luke, fully trained Jedi or not, he would have no realistic chance against either one of them in a fight against either Vader or Sidious, much less both of them at the same time. Unless he gives in and embraces the dark side, then he could perhaps beat Vader. He does indeed kind of beat Vader when he embraces the dark side briefly, which is, of course, what Palpatine's plan pretty much is in this final encounter. He wants and expects Luke to grow frustrated and to fall to the dark side, and to kill Vader and take his place at his side, and so on. And so, at face value, it very much seems like both Yoda and Obi-Wan are pretty much sending Luke to either die or fall to the dark side, or they have some very, very unrealistic expectations for him or out of his ability to fight, which of course is not the point of being a Jedi. The Force is used for knowledge and defense, never attack. So sending Luke to kill Palpatine and Vader kind of flies in the face of that, and flies in the face of what they once tried to do as well, when they went to kill Palpatine and Vader as seen in the prequels. In other words, it seems pretty clear that Yoda and Kenobi must know something they're not telling Luke, that they don't expect him to kill Vader and Sidious. They likely knew that the key here was Luke becoming a Jedi, which is what they're telling him the result of the encounter will be. They're never actually saying to kill either one of them or destroy the Sith in Return of the Jedi. Yes, Kenobi seems disappointed Luke won't consider it, but they're saying you must confront Darth Vader again, and that's all they're saying.
You cannot escape your destiny. You must face Darth Vader again.
And that could be because they're telling Luke exactly what he needs to hear, especially Kenobi, who, let's keep in mind, is a Force ghost at this point. He exists, according to the Clone Wars, in a place that is non-linear, where past, present, and future are all one and can be seen and interpreted, I would suppose. Which might lead you to argue, then why in The Empire Strikes Back does Kenobi not seem to know about Leia?
That boy is our last hope.
No. There is another.
Well, it could be because Obi-Wan already knows Leia will not be the one to ultimately save them, that it will and has to be Luke. but that Luke needs to hear the right things to walk the correct path from here on out. That Luke needs to hear someone questioning this faith he's suddenly finding or going to find in his father, the conflict that Anakin has buried down deep. And this is something I'd argue Luke absolutely has to come to believe all on his own. He cannot be told by Obi-Wan that down deep Anakin is still there and you can save him. He, Luke, has to be the one that feels conflict in his father, feels like he can save him. And we could even argue that being told otherwise by Kenobi, that when he says,
"There is still good in him."
He's more machine now than man, twisted and evil.
it's exactly what Luke needs to hear to strengthen his faith in his father at that moment. That this is his great test, his Jedi trial, that in the very face of the dark side itself, he must hold true to the Jedi ideals and refuse to fight and give into his anger. He must use the Force for knowledge and defense, not to attack, not to go and hunt down and try and destroy the Sith like Obi-Wan and Yoda once tried to do and failed. That becoming a Jedi and a father seeing his son become a Jedi, holding true to what he once failed to hold true to, will be what ultimately wins the day. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think the plan for Luke was. What did Obi-Wan and Yoda really expect him to do? Were they doing and saying exactly what they needed to get Luke to do what he must? Or did Luke simply have faith in Anakin that Obi-Wan and Yoda no longer did? Whatever you think, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.